The TCG industry is packed with games, so it can be tough to know what to spend your time and your hard-earned money on. But I aim to help you out. In this video, I'm going to be looking at a TCG on the market or coming into the market and let you know what I think about it, give you my full in-depth review. And today we are looking at the Neverrift TCG, a TCG launching on Kickstarter in May of 2024. So if you are interested in this game and you want to get my full thoughts on it, stay tuned. We're going to go through everything from production to gameplay to its future support. Let's jump into it. What's up, everyone? It's Dan with Maindeck, and welcome to our review series looking at different TCGs in the industry, you know, what I think of these games, and if I think they are worth your time and money. In this video, we're going to be looking at Neverrift, the board game TCG hybrid, launching on Kickstarter in May of 2024. So this is a pre-production copy. I should mention this game is not yet to Kickstarter or launched yet as I'm recording this video. The cool thing about this game, there's several cool things, but the thing that I want to get out there right away is if you are a fan of Final Fantasy card game Triple Triad, and I should have a little video here on the screen in case you're totally unfamiliar with what I'm talking about. I know a lot of you out there, you know what I'm talking about. If you're a fan of Triple Triad, this game is going to hit some notes for you, and I think you're going to want to take a look at this. Now, in this review video, we're going to be breaking this down into several sections, so if there's a specific thing you want to look at, hit the chapters down in the video below and jump to where you need to go, but we'll start at the very beginning with what is Neverrift. As I mentioned, Neverrift is a hybrid board game TCG from Gate to the Games, a company coming out of Germany, which is really cool to see just because a lot of TCGs tend to come from either the US or Japan. So we're starting to see some more TCGs hitting Kickstarter from different regions of the world. And that's always just it's fun to see different cultural takes on things. In this case, the people who made Neverrift are clearly big Triple Triad fans because they have made Triple Triad in a box with extra stuff in it. It is we'll talk about the gameplay in a little bit, but Neverrift is designed to be a board game and TCG hybrid game, meaning that they're going to be selling this product, which is the board game that's going to come with a bunch of faction decks in it that you are going to be able to pick up and put on your shelf and just kind of take them out and play that way with your friends. Neverrift is designed to go from 2 to 5 players, which is kind of a nice thing to have that multiplayer built in, so it will work very well in that board game setting. But in addition to that, they are going to have booster packs, they are going to have regular releases, they are going to have chase foil, parallel foil cards, and that's kind of organized play as well. That's kind of what you're going to expect from the TCG side of things as well. Now, if you don't know, I was a pretty big tabletop gamer as well, so when I heard there was a board game TCG hybrid, I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. That's really cool to see. When I heard it is, as they like to call it, Triple Triad meets Magic meets chess, I thought, well, I would definitely have to give this game a try. I grew up with Final Fantasy VIII, so this is right up my alley. Before we jump into the production side of things, I want to mention that this, again, is a pre-production copy, so this is not necessarily going to represent the final versions of things. That said, I think what we have here is getting fairly close to that. This is what's in. Again, this says the board game here. This is like the starter set basically for the game, and there will be some additional products as well. Inside this box, we have the five decks, and we'll take a look at the cards inside in a second. You also have some boards so that you can play on them. Again, this is a game that's using a grid. We'll talk about that a little bit in the gameplay section. I don't think this normally comes in here. This is something they sent me, but we'll take a look at this in just a second too. It's a higher rarity card that you'll see in booster packs. And then we get all these tokens. These tokens have gray and gold sides on them inside, and we have these ones that have anchors and shields on them, and these are used for representing things during gameplay, as well as a physical rule book is inside here as well, and some plastic that I failed to remove from the box. So this, we have a full color physical rule book, actually pretty nice looking like this. We did learn the game entirely from this rule book as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the complexity section. But just taking a look at the cards really quickly. So I will pull open. Oh, no, let's not do that one. I want to do the red deck. So there are 5 factions in Neverrift. And this, like I said, comes with 5 different factional decks. And they all feature, every card in the game is this full art, which looks really nice. It's really, really slick looking, pretty solid design. There's nothing that I think is necessarily egregious or anything about this. I think actually everything looks quite good. The art is very good. I want to mention that they did assure me the art is not done via generational AI. So we have traditional artists who all have credits on the card here as well, which I don't think I actually pointed out. Here's the credits on the card listed right up here. And it's a good solid mix of art. Looks generally pretty good together. Here's a cute little otter. And all sorts of different, mythical creatures and everything that you're going to be using to battle your opponent and gain control of their cards. We'll talk again about that in the gameplay section. Your decks all come with a tamer, who's like your leader card, and then the cards in the decks are a mix of creatures, places, and spells. So again, there's 5 different decks here, and they represent different themes. The artwork across the board, I think, is very good quality. If I can pull this off. Here we have this is the Sworn faction, which is kind of like our black, our sacrifice-focused faction. Card backs here are, just nice, like kind of understated, but they work. This is, I believe this is being printed by Ludofact. Ludofact is a printer of a lot of games. They, they print games like Settlers of Catan. They're also one of the printers for the Altered TCG. So this is a company that knows, what they're doing with their manufacturing for sure. Cardstock is, I'd say, just pretty standard. It's just kind of a standard cardstock. It isn't anything like exceptionally thick, but it is serviceable cardstock for sure. So you've got five different decks in there. We'll take a look at some of the like factional cards in a little bit. Rule book, and then here I just want to take a look, since they did send one of these. Now this is an example of what a higher rarity card will look like. So if I understand the scheme that they're going with correctly here, as a card's rarity increases, it'll have additional like foil elements on it. So this card, I believe, is a legendary, which is why it is going to have, or this is the legendary type of foiling. I think this card itself isn't legendary necessarily, because it only is a 1-star card, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is what you'd see on a legendary thing, where the creature itself would be foiled with these like gold accents. I hope this is picking this up. Yeah, it looks like it's picking it up pretty well, but this is, I was actually really impressed. This looks really nice. And then you can get, I believe, if I understand, you can get parallel foils of these as well, where the whole card art will also have a foiling on it, and then this will kind of like pop off of that. So that, I think that would look really cool. I obviously haven't seen any myself yet, but what they sent here is actually a very nice looking higher rarity card. So I think that's pretty rad. So overall, production wise, it's pretty standard. The card quality isn't like anything crazy to talk about, but it's fine. The foils look quite nice. The art is extremely good across the board. I don't know if I've really stated that yet, but like there are some really cool looking pieces of art in here. A blend of like maybe like more peaceful, charming pieces and like cute creatures like otters. And then, some like really cool dragons and the summoning circle. I thought that one was really, this Sworn deck was the first one I played. Stand Against Evil has nice artwork. So a lot of this really like strikes me too. This Phantom Cat's really cool. So yeah, I mean, it's really just solid artwork across the board. They did a really good job getting this art done, and I think the game looks really nice. All right, now let's talk about the complexity of the game, or in other words, how easy is this game to learn? And specifically because this game is trying to be a board game, we want to really look at how tenable is that? How possible will it be for you to pull this game off for a board game night and quickly teach your friends how to play? But just in general, we don't want a card game to have too much complexity, because it can be difficult, harder for it to get players to build up. Before I mention anything about the section, I do want to reiterate that I play a lot of card games, and I have been sent a lot of games that I haven't made videos for one reason or another. I have thus taken a lot of like early rule books, early rule sets, and I have tried to learn how to play the game off of those. And it's taken variable amounts of time. I can say with Neverrift, this game was the easiest teach I have had as someone coming in who hadn't played the game at all before. This rulebook looks pretty thick, actually, but when you look inside of it, here's the quick start guide. I think you can start playing from that, because that is pretty much all. That's like all we really needed. We did dive in here a little bit just for like a couple specifics, like, okay, what order does setting up the game happen in? And then there were like some in here, there's like some, it says detailed rules. The detailed rules is adding one more page basically to the quick start. And then there's a section that's just going over like a sort of a chart for strengths and weaknesses for the factions, if that means anything to you, some glossary of terms, some these are just some like little extra details to how some of these rules work. This is basically the most comprehensive the rules get. And then some deck building rules in the back. So there really isn't a lot here. And honestly, you can teach this game very quickly. This is not going to be a how to play video, but I'm going to briefly explain to you the rules so it'll make some sense when I talk about the rest of the gameplay later on. But the basic idea in a game of Neverrift, and I'll pull the box out here so you can see just sort of a grid on the board. You're going to play a game of Neverrift on a 4x4 board. And I also want to be clear that I have played a lot of grid-based card games, and I am not usually a huge fan of grid-based card games. But this game, this was very easy to learn, and I had a pretty good impression with this overall. So you're going to start by drawing 6 cards from your deck, and then on your turn, you're going to be able to play up to 1 creature and up to 1 place on this grid. You may also play any number of spell cards from your hand on your turn. When you've completed doing the things you need to do, you pass the turn to your opponent. At the start of your turn, you draw a card, and then they get to do the same thing. Now, anytime a creature is played, it is going to attack anything directionally facing it. So in this case, if this Chimera were mine and this were controlled by the opponent, the Satyr is controlled by the opponent, this would attack this. You compare the stats. If you have a higher stat, you gain control of this. And we mark control of these units by using these little tokens here. So if I am the gray player, I would mark a gray here when I play my Chimera. And I would then, if this Satyr were the gold players, my 5 would attack the 3, and I would tame it, is called, gain control of it. So additionally, if there were units on any of these other sides, I would also attack those when I play this. Places don't get attacked. They don't have ownership. And you're going to continue playing these units, attacking them, using their effects, playing places, using their effects, playing spells, using their effects, and then using your leader's passive and active abilities. Passive active is something that happens every turn. Active is something you can use once per game. You'll use all these effects to try and ultimately tame as many creatures as you can. And when the board is completely full, the game will end, and the player who owns or who controls the most creatures at that point, the player who's tamed the most creatures, is going to be the winner of the game. And honestly, you can pick up the decks and start playing right now. You would only have a couple of small like rules quirk questions, but that's the idea of the game. That's how the game works. Given that I just explained to you effectively the entire rule set of the game in a couple of minutes, this is, again, one of the easiest games that TCGs, I should say, one of the easiest TCGs that I have personally gotten the opportunity to play and teach to other people. And it just flows very easily. It makes a lot of sense. This directionality makes sense to people. Complexity-wise now, does it get complicated? There are actually, there are some rules interactions that are just a little interesting, and there are a lot of effects that will impact the game pretty strongly. The big thing about this game is that because there is no resource system, you just play up to 1 creature and up to 1 place, and then any number of spells. You can actually do a lot of stuff on a turn, especially when you have a big hand with a lot of these spells that are going to start messing around with things. You'll have effects that, in fact, this is one right here that says you can choose a creature and a place and swap their positions. So you could play this and then swap the positions of these 2 things, which may either bring a creature out that you can then fight to tame with your creature play for the turn, or it may move a place to a position where the place might have an effect that affects adjacent spots, and it might become more advantageous for you or less advantageous for your opponent to move that place around. So all these effects will start to do things. There are some effects that can allow you to perform additional attacks with things, draw cards, again, like push, pull units around. gain control of units, all, any effect you can imagine is something that could be on these spell cards. So we did find in some of the games, especially with particular factions, this blue faction was a big culprit of this. This blue faction's big mechanic is moving creatures around the board. And we found that you could get to these turns where you had to be in the tank. You had to be thinking for a long time to try and figure out exactly, what your good play is. But when you find that play, you kind of go off. You just start playing, I'm going to play this, and I'm going to play this, and I'm going to play this, and then I'm going to play my creature, and it's going to attack those things, and I'm going to play this thing and move them around. And you could have like this big combo turn where your opponent's been kind of just gaining control of everything throughout the game, but then you're able to string all these cards together to position things in the right spot, attack things, take control of things. And it does get complicated. It gets a little convoluted just to figure out that turn, but it's not a complexity where it's difficult to learn. It's more a complexity of just figuring out the right way to sequence things to be effective in the way you want to, which is the kind of complexity that I think is best in a card game, where if players don't understand that complexity, they're not necessarily missing out on playing the game. They're just missing out on potentially winning the game. And it's something that's nice for then players to start to get into and find, oh, there's actually a lot of strategy in here, and saving the right effect for the right turn is often, the kind of the difference between winning and losing the game. So yeah, those are my thoughts on complexity. Overall, this is one of the easiest TCGs that I have found to teach. And I say that after playing a lot of different TCGs. This one just comes out about very smoothly, very intuitively. And something that the company tries to do is also put low text on cards. So there's a lot of keyword abilities that just have a simple ability, but it's the combination of the keyword ability, the stats on the card, sometimes the, what faction the card is, and then how that relates to different place effects. The effects are typically not longer than a couple of sentences on spells. Here's a 3-line effect. These 3-line effects might be the longest ones in the game. And most are going to be like 2 lines or even 1 line. And there's just not a crazy amount of text, not a crazy amount of iconography, not a ton of stuff going on in the cards, where everything just kind of builds on this grid system to keep the game a little more interesting. So those are my notes on the complexity of the game. So with that covered, let's talk about the gameplay after we learned the game and after we played a number of games. How was the gameplay? What did we think of the game? Our group was extremely positive about this game, actually. We found this game to be fairly snappy. Again, there were some turns where you can be thinking a little bit longer, but the game played really quick. We had a lot of games that were like a 10-minute game, and players are just playing cards back and forth and knocking things out, moving things around, and things happen very fast, very snappy. We didn't get a chance to play multiplayer, unfortunately. It was mostly just 2-player, or entirely just 2-player games. But everyone quite enjoyed the experience, and it's the kind of game where even when you're losing the game, it is possible to set up that turn where, as I mentioned, you just play a huge combo of spells and places and a place in your creature, and you kind of take over the game in a way that your opponent might not be expecting. So one thing I note about this game is when you're playing this, you never quite know who is going to win the game until the game actually ends. I had plenty of games that came right down to the wire where I thought, I've got this, and then I did not have it at the end of the game. The game is very fun, actually, and I say this as someone who doesn't usually enjoy grid-based games, but I do have that triple Triad background, and if you know that game at all, you know everything I described here is triple Triad, but plus places and spell cards. And the difference between this and a lot of grid-based games that I've played is a lot of grid-based games are attempting to be a war game in the TCG space. They're trying to mimic playing a game of Warhammer or War Machine or whatever, but using cards on a grid. And what I usually feel about those games is that they just kind of go halfway. They don't quite give me the full card game feel that I enjoy in TCGs, but they also don't give me the full war game feel that I enjoy I've come from a history of playing games like Warhammer as well. And I really enjoy those games for what those are. And I always feel like those TCG on a grid or tactical TCGs or whatever you want to call them are games that they just never quite hit for me. They're not something I feel like I want to play over and over again. The difference here is that this grid is not utilized in that same manner. We're not, a lot of those games will have use action points to move things around, declare attacks on things. This is very simple, straightforward. The grid is there. The grid is positioning something you have to be aware of, but it's never any more complicated than, well, this thing has a 3, 3, 4, and a 5, so I should maybe put it in the corner where it's going to be defended a little better, or I should try and play it where it can flip something, And when you do that, when you keep it kind of as simple as that, you don't have to worry about where's the terrain, where am I moving my units around, how do I flank my opponent? That stuff is stuff that I always feel personally is better left to the actual miniatures games that replicate that a lot better. And the TCGs, I kind of want to be just quick and snappy and have them just work with cards alone. And this works great with cards alone. This game, I had a totally different feel from it. I felt like I was playing Triple Triad combined with Magic. A game that had a lot of punch to it, a lot of fun combo potential, but also just could play quick and snappy. And we just would we jammed out a ton of these games using all the different decks, tried a whole bunch of different combinations of factions against each other, found really interesting faction differences too. So as far as, are you going to get a variety of play from this game? Out of this starter deck or board game box, these 5 factions all play entirely differently. So let's look at a couple of these, and just so you can get an idea of what their mechanics are like. So let's start with the Sworn deck, which is the black deck. This is the first deck that I learned how to play with. Here we have our Tamer, Ludwig von Aschberg, and then we have 2 creatures, a place, and a spell. And I think from these you get a pretty good idea of how this works. Ludwig has a passive ability that allows you to, instead of destroying a place, move it somewhere else on the field. So you can use that to disrupt where your opponent can play a little bit, or put negative effect places somewhere where they're going to impact your opponent's creatures. Additionally, as an active, so as once per game, is for your next sacrifice, you may choose a place instead of a creature. So we have sacrifice creatures in this deck, which are usually pretty strong creatures, but they require you to destroy a creature you control and then play this creature on its field instead. But the cool thing is, using some of our spells and effects, we don't necessarily have to destroy only our own creatures for those. So here's Illusion. Illusion lets you choose a creature your opponent controls and tame it until the end of your turn. So you can tame their creature and then sacrifice it to the Arachnor, and then it can immediately fight the things that are surrounding, which presumably might be of the opposing faction as well, which is pretty sweet. Another creature in here, this is a very powerful one in the deck, Cerberus, who has Grave Digging, which is search your discard pile for a card and put it in your hand, then discard a card. So allows you to get back your sacrifice units, your powerful spells like Illusion, and is a powerful stats on its own. And here's a Place Summoning Circle, which is all players return the top card of the discard piles to their hands, which is another way, again, so we're getting that graveyard recursion. We are getting ways to just kind of manipulate your opponent's stuff, take their things, sacrifice their things, sacrifice this place afterwards instead of a creature in order to put a creature into play. So you're going to get a lot of this stuff in the black deck, and it was a ton of fun to play and very sneaky, very fun to be like, you thought your things were safe, but actually I'm going to take that and now I'm going to sack it and I'm going to fight your stuff. All right, the Free Tribes are next, and the Free Tribe are our red faction, or our reddish faction, I guess, in the box. The Tamer here is Thiana, Merchant of the South, who has the passive, if Stampede is triggered by one of your creatures, you may instead choose to draw a card, and then active, your next Stampede card can set another Stampede card into play. So what does that mean? Stampede creatures are the theme of this deck. These are creatures that when you play a Stampede creature after it attacks, you may set another creature without Stampede onto play on an adjacent field, and it also attacks. So you can't normally chain Stampede into Stampede, although you have a bunch of Stampede creatures, but her active lets you once per game actually do that, a Stampede into a Stampede and then into a non-Stampede creature. So this deck can just pump out a ton of creatures suddenly, especially adept at ending the game before you realize it, because normally you can only put 2 things into play on your turn, but this can allow them to play 3, which means the game might end a little before you have a chance to respond if you leave enough spots or not enough spots open at the end of your turn. They have spells that allow them to, you guess, move and attack, and they like to hit things. And here's a place, Northern Foothills, that just pumps up the power of their Free Tribes units. So this is the kind of stompy deck if you're just looking to play stuff and attack with it and move things around and attack with it more. This deck is going to be the perfect deck for you. So our next faction is the White faction, or the Royal Empire. This faction is a pretty fun faction that has a cool mechanic called Liberate that we'll look at in a second. This is led by Megtilda von Oramel, who has two effects. The passive, which is if you've tamed at least 2 creatures in one card, then you draw a card. And then her active is you get to choose a place, and for this turn, if your creature attacks that would attack that place, or has a value that would attack that place, instead they get to attack anything adjacent to that place. So you get to use a place basically as a proxy for a creature. And so, for example, if you attack this place with this 7, you would then attack 7 on all adjacent sides to that place once per game. So pretty neat. Now, the creatures we have here, we have one Golden Crane that has Liberate, and then we have this Roaming Angel. Now, Liberate is a special mechanic in the Royal Empire faction, which says when this creature tames a creature, it tames the creature on its opposite side as well. So you see, this creature is a great example because it is a 6 on the right side and a 1 on the left. So if you play this and it tames the creature on the right, it will also tame the creature on the one side, the left, no matter what the stat difference is. So you can set up, you have to kind of play a little differently with Royal Empire, try and set up these opposing sides so you can take one and flip the other. But it's a fun thing to play around, and something that will then allow you to trigger Megtilda to draw a card because you get to tame 2 things with 1 card play. They also have a lot of defensive cards. So here's the Roaming Angel. It says this creature blocks the next incoming attack. So this is where this would get that shield token. There we go. So this would get a shield token on it. Now the next time it would be attacked, instead of being tamed, it is just going to get blocked. The College of Magical Studies is the place I chose to grab for this, that shows you that this has an aura. Whenever a creature comes into play, its controller draws a card. So there are going to be a few ways to actually move your things around, bounce them out of play again. And here's Redemption. This spell we found to be really powerful. Choose a creature of the Royal Empire your opponent controls. It returns to its owner's hand. So you will eventually lose control of your stuff, because if you don't, your opponent's not going to win the game. And this allows you to then take your Royal Empire unit, bounce that your opponent took, bounce it back to your hand, which then opens up that spot on the board, which you could potentially then, if the setting's right, play the same thing again, or play a different card there to take the things around it instead. Potentially, again, this sets up a spot where there's going to be multiple creatures around the card so that you can get that double tame to get the draw card from Megtilda. So it's a, pretty fun faction, defensive, but also has this kind of cool, like, opposite sides thing that's trying to care about. That is the Royal Empire faction. So the blue faction, or the Outcasts, are led by Orbo the Lurker. And this faction is all about moving stuff around. It's like water flows. They're going to be just trying to move your opponent's things all over the board, put them in the right position, and take them out. Orbo the Lurker's passive is if you moved at least 2 creatures in one turn, you get to draw a card. So when you move that second one, you get that draw. And then active is choose a place and move up to 2 creatures onto adjacent field. So if you have a place in play, then you can move any 2 creatures onto any adjacent spots to that place, just like that. And that's once per game. So a lot of just very strong movement that you can do to get things positioned to where maybe those less optimal sides, like this one or one of these ones, is now showing, and you can take them out that way. Our creatures here have more abilities to move things around. You won't believe the amount of movement we have. This ability is really cool. This hook ability on Leviathan is you choose a creature your opponent controls and move it to an adjacent field with this card, and then it immediately gets attacked by this card as well. The hook happens before the attack, so like Scorpion in Mortal Kombat, you're just going to get over here the card and then attack it and tame it. Leviathan, of course, has an A side, A being, just like in Final Fantasy VIII's Triple Triad, the strongest stat in the game. Horror from the Depths is another example of moving things around, but in a different way. This is after this creature attacks, then you intimidate. Adjacent creatures move a field away from this card if the field is empty. So you'll attack, potentially tame their things, and then send them away, if possible, directionally, which then allows you to, manipulate where they are so that you can free up more spots to move more things in. So pretty neat little ways of moving, and this can move multiple things, of course, too, which can immediately trigger Orbo. We have found this really powerful place, Bedazzling Lagoon. When you play this down, if adjacent fields are empty, the next creature in the respective line, so a respective line from this location, moves towards this field, and then towards this place, so moves the field to this place, and if at least one creature is moved this way, you draw a card. So basically, this lagoon comes out there, and you're going to force an opponent's creature to move towards it. They're bedazzled by it, and when they do move towards it, then you get to draw a card. And then Rising Swirl, this was an interesting card. says, choose a creature you control. If adjacent fields are empty, the next creature in the respective line moves on to that field. So a lot like the Lagoon, you're going to choose a creature you control instead of the Lagoon. If it has an adjacent spot, the next creature in the respective line moves to it, and then if at least one creature is moved, then your creature gets to attack it, which is pretty cool as well. So yeah, just all movement, moving things around, attacking. This is the deck where it might take you a while to figure out how to manipulate the cards on the board, but when you do, you're going to find a really cool line and then be able to take things out and then take over the game. Finally, we have the green faction, the Verdant Pact, led by Pandora the Warden. Pandora the Warden's abilities are passive. If a place comes into play adjacent to another place during your turn, you get to draw a card. And then active, you may move places on the battleground during your turn. So that's once per game. You get to just move places around in one shot as much as you want to. So it's obviously very place focused, but has some really cool mechanics in the creatures as well. Let's start by looking at those creatures. Now, there's a couple of kind of interesting mechanics that you see here. They're in the Verdant Pact, there's a lot of effects that are Augury or Draw card. Augury just lets you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put them back in any order, and then you can use that to then potentially set up what your draws are for some of your other draw effects, or like Pandora's draw effect when you play at second place that turn. Just generally some decent stats with some good control of your deck. And then we have a bunch of units that have the Pierce ability. So this is a really strong unit. 7s all around, Forest Dragon. With Pierce, this creature attacks the second creature in line as well. That is so powerful when you have 2 creatures out here. This can attack this one and this one, this one and this one. So and it's attacking with a 7 each time, which is obviously a really strong stat. So what the Verdant Pact are trying to do is just set up a big sweep with one big unit. And then using their places and their ability to move places, they can set up their homes, all over the board, set up some kind of place here. And then after a bunch of enemy units get placed around there, use Pandora's active to just get this out of here, move it, and then play your big Pierce unit, and then just take everything that has now positioned around your card. As far as places, of course, there are a bunch of places in the deck. Here's a great one, the Sprout of Yggdrasil, that says all places of the Verdant Pact on the battlefield gain aura. Creatures of the Verdant Pact gain +1. So if you then can move this and then place the Pierce Dragon here, or the Forest Dragon here, then it is going to pierce for 8, which is going to get over some thresholds and allow you to take things out. So obviously this is better with the more places you play as well. And here's Homeward. Homeward's a spell that says, choose a creature you control and move it to an adjacent field of a place. If the place was in the Verdant Pact, to draw a card. So there's a way to even just get this moved over to here so that then you can draw a card off of it, and it has this buff. Now, when things are moved, they don't immediately attack as far as we're aware, but cards that can have cards in your deck that can allow it to attack again as well. So that's the Verdant Pact. If you like to kind of build places, draw cards, and then play big dragons that do piercing damage and just big monsters, big dinosaurs that your opponent can't get over, this is going to be the faction for you. All right, so hopefully now you have a pretty good idea of how these different factions play, the different play styles you can see, and maybe it looks like a fun game to you. But of course, this also has deck building, as it's a TCG. So the neat thing about the deck building in this game, you're building a 30-card deck plus a tamer, but there's an additional stipulation, which is that every card is going to have some number of stars on it that dictate its power. I know some of you were probably thinking out there, if you're triple Triad veterans, you're like, well, of course you just put all of the face characters in, put all of the most powerful units in. Why would you play anything that is less powerful? But the less powerful units maybe don't have stars at all, or have a smaller number of stars. So your deck is gated in just, how many giant powerful things it can play, in addition to being limited to the 30 cards per deck, and then up to 2 copies of anything except legendary cards you can only have 1 copy of in your deck. So there's going to be plenty to explore. They have mentioned that there are going to be multiple releases throughout the year, although it's not locked in exactly how many releases they're going to have. But if you enjoy this game and you enjoy building your own decks, you'll be able to look forward to getting those as well, and then tweaking the decks exactly how you would like to play your perfect style. Some of these cards also, you might have noticed, don't have the same color. So we have our black cards here, but you also have cards that are neutral ones, gray ones that any deck can play. So there's plenty of ability to mix and match those, although I believe it's other than the gray cards, you are sticking to the single faction of your tamer in each deck as well. So overall, I really enjoy the gameplay. Haven't gotten to build decks at all yet, but looking forward to potentially trying that in the future. I found this game to be really fun, quick, snappy, has a lot of variety in how the different factions and abilities play out, and it worked really well just out of the box as a board game experience, but I do think by adding in the TCG aspect, picking up booster packs, it is going to be even more enjoyable. Now, in the final section of these reviews, we are going to be talking about the future support for the game. And this is usually going to cover things like future set releases, organized play support, or any other things that are worth noting that provide, the company providing support to the game. In this section, as Neverrift is a Kickstarter TCG, it doesn't have a set in stone organized play plan, or it doesn't have set in stone release plan. I've seen from the devs talking in different communities, they're looking at potentially somewhere between 2 to 4 sets a year, as well as supporting organized play to some degree. It is not intended to just be a board game on your shelf, but have an organized play program of some kind as well. But right now I can't give specifics on that because we don't really have them. One thing, though, that the devs are pushing very hard, and I have definitely been saving this for last because this is a very interesting feature, but this game is releasing as physical and digital simultaneously. So inside the booster packs, they intend to do a code card system where your booster packs will give you a code card that you can redeem digitally, and I will have some, of course, shots of the digital client appearing here now, but the digital client will allow you to play Neverrift on your mobile device using the collection that you build from the booster pack code cards, or I believe potentially buying the products digitally as well. So if you're someone who likes playing digital card games, and especially for me as someone who enjoyed playing Triple Triad a ton on my PlayStation, I think this sounds pretty nice. I think this sounds like a great game to be able to pop up on the mobile device and play at any time. And the code card system will allow you to build a physical collection at the same time, build a digital collection, and be able to play decks on both. Now, that's where the Kickstarter comes into play, of course. The digital client went through a beta test last winter, so the Kickstarter, I'm sure, will go towards funding the final completion of that, as well as getting the game printed and out to you. So hopefully, if you are looking forward to Neverrift, the Kickstarter does well and all those things can get funded. If they all do, then you're looking at a game that is going to have not only physical support as far as organized play and more releases, but digital support as well, going down the line where you're going to be able to play those new physical releases digitally as well as physically with your friends. And that is what the future support, as far as we know, currently looks like for Neverrift. All right, so time for my final thoughts. What do I think of Neverrift as someone who plays just about every card game, has tried a ton of Kickstarter card games, and I think is, in a good position to give you some pretty objective thoughts. If you didn't catch overall, I like Neverrift quite a bit. I think this is a good game. I think this is a really fun game to play. It does have there's a couple of things that I think need a little bit of work. Things like some of the rules text was not 100% clear on these cards, but when I talked to the developers, they mentioned they're cleaning up the rules text. They're open to suggestions. This is still, again, an early product going to Kickstarter, and they intend to get the rules text cleaned up afterwards on the cards to make sure everything just is very, very clear. They don't want you to have to reference outside rule sources to play the game. The rules you need should be on the cards, which makes sense given how easy the game was to learn. I think Neverrift was is the easiest TCG I've taught to anybody. You just pick it up like that. It's intuitive, especially if they've ever played Triple Triad. It's just instant. They just basically understand how to play this game. You need to know, okay, you have to play either or, one creature, one place per turn. You can play both. You can play any number of spells. Okay, I got it. Then you just do what the cards say, and you play the game out until the grid's filled out, and then you figure out the winner. As far as flipping these tokens, I kind of thought this might be a little bit fiddly at first, where you have to flip these to determine ownership, but it just works pretty nicely. It's actually a nice opportunity for them to add in some cool deluxe components as well for deluxe tokens indicating ownership of cards or control of cards, I should say. So that's always kind of nice. And all you really need to do is bring this pile of tokens and have this grid to play on. And that's everything you need to play the game as well as your deck. So It's really not that bad. It's not as fiddly as it might be. And we're starting to see more of these card games that have some outside components coming in there. And I don't mind that. I think it works pretty well. The artwork is fantastic. The card quality is fine. Nothing too crazy. I do think that this foil card looks pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what more of the foils look like. But overall, I would recommend Neverrift, especially to people who are looking for a board game-like experience. If you already have card games you're committed to, Neverrift seems like it would be a good side game that you could add on. That you might be able to just, can pick up the box for your board game shelf, or you can pick up a box of boosters and just kind of build what you can from there. That star system should keep things feeling relatively balanced. The starter deck cards already seem pretty crazy and swingy, so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of starter decks could just kind of keep up decently with all but the most competitively built decks. And if you're looking for a competitive card game to dive into, you might find that you enjoy the play. If you like this grid system, if you were a big triple Triad fan as well, you might find that I think there is room to get very competitive with this game as well. Although I think you do have to accept that the game does get very swingy. For some people, the swinginess might be a problem. It might be something where I want a game that I have more control over. I want a game that I get to see my whole deck. I get to just play things out and always kind of have control over where the variance is going in any given game. But if you're someone who is okay with things getting a little bit bombastic, a little bit swingy, a little bit fun, then Neverrift is going to be a game that might be right up your alley and is worth looking at. So my overall review, I think this game is an excellent game to look at, especially as a side game or a board game to be able to play, but a game that you can, I think, also dive into and find some really, really fun strategy to build out. Great art, fine production to potentially good production, depending on how more of these foils look, and a game that I think is worth your time and worth looking at. So overall, I was not sure I would like this game as much as I did, but I ended up really enjoying this, and I'm really happy to be able to say that I can recommend Neverrift. So that's going to do it for our Neverrift review video. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions about Neverrift or want any deeper thoughts about anything in particular, go ahead down in the comments below. Let me know what you would like to know more about Neverrift, or let me know your thoughts or your experiences with Neverrift down below as well. I would love to hear from you guys. And if you are interested in the game, make sure you check out the Kickstarter when it launches. I believe it is launching on May 28th, 2024, which should be a good day to hop in and see everything that this company, that Gate to the Games, is starting to offer for this game and what their support is going to look like going forward. I'm excited for the launch, and I'm personally going to be checking it out. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.